Every creative does things differently. So for you, when you have an idea, how does that go from start to finish normally?
I love research.
Yeah.
So like my house, I have thousands of books, thousands of magazines, like tons of VH movies. And that's kind of how I'm old school. And I'll go look at a photo book and like flip through a photo book, or I'll be like, oh, I'm working on this project. Oh, I'll go to eBay and buy like a ton of old heavy metal magazines and like look at all the illustrations and be like, all right, this is cool. This is how we can do that. And then, that's another thing I like about stop motion, where it's all pre-production work. So like all my work really is in like storyboard, set design, and concept art. So, and I like doing that kind of by myself, and then once I have the idea kind of ironed out, then I'll go like share it with the people that, like with the set designers, the puppet designers, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm still old school. Yeah. I need to see something, you can't beat going to a bookstore and finding a book and being like, holy shit.
Yeah. I like old school as well. I'm a pen to paper kind of person. It's just like, get all of your ideas out on one page.
Yeah.
But for people who are watching this and they themselves are interested in maybe getting into stop motion or filmmaking, photography, how would you recommend they go about it? Were you self-taught yourself? Or?
Yeah, I was totally I'm a hack. I don't know how to, I can't really do much in stop motion other than direct it. But I think like if I were giving advice to someone now getting into media, I would specifically advise them to do things that are truly unique to their situation. And focus on that. Like, what are you actually interested in? Like, what's your background? What's really specific about that? And then how can you kind of take modern skills and modern technology and focus on that?
Yeah.
As opposed to just like seeing who can shout the loudest, Because we were talking about this earlier, like one of the biggest issues I think with social media, especially from a corporate perspective, but definitely from a content creator perspective, is this idea that, a creative person's their gift is to be observant and see things that other people aren't seeing, and then kind of move in a direction that kind of lines up with that. And to use a car analogy, if you're just looking at data, you're literally driving a car in reverse, looking at the rear view mirrors. You have no concept of what's happening. You're just like, oh, this worked and that worked. It's like, well, actually the road turned, and if you would have paid attention, you would have figured that out. Otherwise, you just drive off the road.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm anti-statistics. Or not anti-statistics, but it's like, that's not the full picture, And if you focus on that, you lose sight of either what you're interested in or what your brand message is too,
Yeah. No, it's so true. And, I think it's so wonderful to hear this from your perspective, because you've lived it out, you have that experience. And yeah, I'm inspired. We guys all inspired as well? Yeah? Loving it. Okay, so Foster, reflecting on your journey, just kind of ending things up, what would you say the biggest lesson you learned was, and how did you overcome that, and what did you take away from it?
I would say like my biggest lessons is that you really I'm dyslexic. I learned to read at a really late time.
Yeah.
And I think like because of that, I thought most stuff was really challenging. And by the time I found visual stuff and started doing photography, that was like the first time that things really clicked and felt effortless. As opposed to me like studying super hard and doing terrible on tests.
Yeah.
This was the first time I did that. And I think there's this like idea that success is like, obviously you have to work really hard. But from my own experience, like the things that I worked really hard at didn't always work out. Whereas like with visual stuff, it just was like second nature to me. But by combining that with like a work ethic that I learned from like, having to learn how to read, having to do stuff like that, really let me like make more work than the other person. And then another thing I would add is just this idea that like as a creative person, there's this idea of perfection where like everything you need to do needs to be the best. And that's not necessarily the case. Like a creative person ultimately, like look at Werner Herzog. He's made like 1 million movies, and they're like, no one's going to talk about the bad movies he made. They're going to talk about the amazing ones. And because he makes a movie a year, and like, I think there's something to be said for that as a creative person, where you just kind of like force yourself to keep making stuff.
Yeah.